And please welcome moderator Brian Frons and Emmy Award-winning director Mary Lou Belli.
I'm stage left. Yes, you're stage
There we go, yep. Good morning, everybody. So some terrific panels already this morning, really talking about where things are going in the business. And we have a director who came up from Atlanta, where she's been nominated 3 times for doing the Miss Pat show for BET. And what's so terrific about Mary Lou is that she's at the opposite end of a lot of people here who are looking and figuring out how to start their careers. She has innovated herself many, many times. So why don't we start with the beginning of the path to 125 sitcom episodes directed?
Actor, singer, dancer. So triple threat. Understood comedy, although I never think of myself as a funny person, but I understand the structure of comedy. And for every episode you do on television, it's a learning pattern. You know, it's like, what's the formula here? How are the jokes structured? And for anybody who's smart, and I was always a lifelong reader, it was very easy for me to go, oh, this is that. So recognizing patterns has always been a sort of thing, a part of my entire life and career pattern.
So a lot of times at the beginning of careers, people hit a wall.
Yeah.
Right? And they just say, I'm going to go sell real estate. I have a lot of friends that sell real estate.
Not a bad thing.
So, and used to be in TV. So you're a performer. And what happens at the moment where this is not for me? How do you hear that news? How do you process that news? And then how did you pivot?
Well, for me, it wasn't hearing the news, it was discovering the news. Because for me, nobody told me that. I was still working. And I went, oh, I don't like this very much, or it's not where I'm getting my jollies. My jollies came from when I reached my first, theatrical show that went over 100 performances. I wanted to kill myself. I went, wait, I can't do this over and over and over. I wanted something new. I wanted something fresh. And I discovered even as a performer, what I liked doing more than performing was rehearsing. For me, it was the puzzle. But once the puzzle was solved, I wanted to move on to the next puzzle. And I've also looked at my career that way. What's the puzzle? Like when there's trends, and for me it was, I don't want to be in front of the camera anymore, but what do I have a skill set for that would, land me, that's usable, and not only usable, but would set me ahead of everybody else trying to do this same thing. And it wasn't without a little pause. When I said, I don't want to perform anymore, I said to myself, what else do I want to do? And this has been kind of, as I said, a pattern in my whole life. So I investigated. I went like 4 or 5 things that I love to do. I love to cook. Before I went into show business, I seriously considered culinary school. I also thought, I'm good on my feet. I'm a thinker. Do I want to get a law degree and really be an attorney, but not an attorney that's doing contracts, but like on my feet. I also looked at being a psychologist, and I went, okay, I understand people. That's so much of acting is understanding motivation. And then I went, but I've invested a lot of time in this showbiz thing. And I have a lot of contacts in this business, and I still love it. I just wanted to be in a different spot entering the business. And that was when directing came up. And literally it was an actor who had been, he was a very famous actor. He'd been on the Newhart show, and he was on the first show that I got 4 days after I got to Los Angeles. And he took me aside and he said, you're a director. And I argued with him. I had taken 1 class at the university level in directing, and I went, I'm not very good at this. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was young. I graduated from college with 40 extra credits in 3 years. Little, type A, yes. But then I realized that, I was more grown up than I was in college. A lot of life things had happened to me, including the death of a very close friend and, visiting a mom who, had terminal cancer. Those life things change you. And I went, okay, I've handled a lot, and now I have a point of view about life. And then I took that point of view into, looking at stories and scripts and saying, oh, okay, yeah, I do have an opinion about how this should go.
So, I think for a number of people in the room, they sit and say, okay, I've done this, but now I want to be in entertainment, or I'm in entertainment, I want to pivot to do something else. So how did you sort of frame up the story, and how did you prepare? Let's say you're going to go into an office with somebody and go, I'm not an actress anymore, now I want to be a director. How do you take that storytelling and present it to someone and prepare to talk to someone about a change in life?
Well, I always think that people, and I always say, there is no too low position to enter where you want to be, because people make impressions literally in 5 minutes. And I've seen people jump 5 job categories in the course of 1 season. And that happens because people notice you if you're good at something. And it might be you're the best coffee orderer, or you bring everything to the soundstage and it's exactly what you ordered, it's on time, and you can make an impression doing almost anything. And I also found that moving up within the ranks was very easy. So I immediately approached people who I knew were doing what I wanted to do. I said, I showed up. Before I directed my first episode of television. I had camera blocked close to 100 episodes on
Explain
paper.
what camera blocking
Meaning
is.
just setting what the cameras are going to be at any moment. And in multi-camera, it's 4 cameras all the time. And then there's a first pass and a second pass. So that means for every scene there's 8 cameras that are, following that. And sometimes 12 if there's enough people in the scene. So I knew I could do that. And again, that showing up. If you're there before anybody starts work, you stay after, people start to notice. And then it's also, the important part of the equation is also asking for what you want. It's not about necessarily saying, I deserve to be here. So entitlement was never part of my equation, but doing the work and making an impression probably was the most important thing. And then on top of that, I knew the acting part. I was completely trusted because I came up from being an actor to an acting coach to a director. So people trusted me with performances from the get-go. They knew I could deliver something. And having that reputation was stellar. And I just, as one of my mentors said, okay, half the job. You're really good at half the job. What are you going to do to get good at the rest of it?
And what was it as an actor that made you a better director? Or to say it another way, what did you admire with the directors you worked with, and how have you incorporated it to your style of directing?
Well, first of all, there's 2 differences. I always say I can tell an actor, like, if they walk in front of a mirror or anything that's shiny and glass, if they look at themselves, they're an actor for life. I can walk in front of a mirror or something shiny and glass and never give a crap what I look like. So, but also, it was never about me. There was a lyric in a Broadway show when I was living in New York, and the lyric was, "What is it that we're living for? Applause, applause." Mm-hmm. And I went, "Oh, not me." So that was never. And as a director or even a producer, because I'm an EP on the Miss Pat show, which you mentioned, and I have a whole development slate now. It's not about me. It's, I always, when I teach directing, and I teach for, Sony and NBC Launch and HBO Access when it existed, and the AFI Directing Workshop for Women and the DGA, if there's a director who talks too much, I let them know they're doing this badly, because it's not about them. It's about the people who actually have to talk in front of the camera, who should be the stars. So I would say knowing where your personality fits in and how much or how little you should be doing to inflate the people who matter and whose personalities should be, noticed. I'd rather be in the sidelines or behind, so I don't need that kind of attention.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice for anybody managing an entertainment company to really understand, it's not about you, it's about the people that actually make the product, because that's what drives the business.
It does.
So talk about this switch to development. Explain what development really means, the material part, the sales part, the execution part, so everybody's, sort of in the loop of how difficult that transition is and what you really need to do.
Well, I have to say the transition, the first book series I optioned, I took out and sold within 3 months to NBC as a pilot. So nobody has that kind of luck, usually. But at the same time, the biggest compliment I got from the NBC UTV people that I was dealing with was, you brought us a dream team. So for me, I have to have good taste. I have to have a product that I think is commercial. I have to then figure out how to option that or get a shopping agreement for it and not spend my money because I'm not interested in that. But also people who want to hitch their journey to me because I have, again, good taste and I can attract the kind of person who's going to write this pilot or exec produce this pilot. And therefore, if I can bring a team together that is attractive, then I hitch my talent or my becoming the director of the pilot and an exec producer on the show because I own the IP. I think this is the most important thing to know. You have to own the IP, and you have to know where IPs come from. Sometimes they come from newspaper articles. My management team happens to have a deal with Fortune that any article written by an in-house writer can be optioned for free. But also I've seen things in my alumni magazine where I went, oh, this is a potential for a TV series. So I'm always looking for what has some legs. Do I have the proper talent to attach to it? And that talent isn't actors. That it's too early to attach actors. I'm looking for someone to write the show and run the show. Because in television, that's God. The exec producer showrunners are the people who have the most power. And that's who I want to be associated with. And when you're as old as I am and you have longevity in the business, there's people who want to work with you. And I'll tell another story. I'm going into the big streaming service in less than a week with a project, again, another book series I optioned. And I brought it to exec producers who I knew loved working with me and who I had worked with for multiple seasons on a show. They respected me. I knew it was going to be a great relationship. They read the first 4 books in this series. There are 13. And I could tell, they said, Mary Lou, we would do anything with you. And I thought, but that's not something I can move forward with. I don't want you to do this series because you like me. You have to like the series. And at the second meeting we had, I said, listen, there's an outlier book in this series. The author almost never even mentions it, but it was the hook that made, it was in a different genre. One of them was in the women's literature, and then this one had to do with fantasy and a little bit sci-fi. And they went, oh my God, that's what makes this different. And all of a sudden, they had the engine. And I was smart enough to know all the books in the series because I had read all of them. And the moment that they had read that book, it was smooth sailing. And, and then I called a producer who had worked with that streaming network a lot, had a hit series that was going into its 4th or 5th season, maybe 6th season, which is really unusual in that arena. And I went, okay, this is just like that, except it has a little bit of difference. And the person who had been exec producer of that show, not the creator, but the person who had the relationship with the streamer said, it's great that it's just like their hit show, but it's so lovely that there's an additive to it that makes it different from that.
Yeah. Familiar, but different. This is television in its core.
Yeah.
So we hear about all the change, right? So there's streaming, there's gaming, there's whatever. When you're looking at a piece of material, are you starting with, here's what the community is looking for, or do you start with, this is a story I want to tell, and how do you balance, what's true to you, what you feel is truthful, authentic storytelling with, I can sell this?
Well, for me, it has to be that I have to be able to be passionate enough to talk about it. Even to the writers, I'm going to say, hey, this has legs. I don't know, agencies get lists of this is what they're looking for. You know what? They're not really looking for that. No, they're not. They don't know what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's going to sell and have legs. So my feeling is something good that has quality, that is a great story. Maybe it's a great story we haven't seen. Now, if I hear one more time, oh, it's period. Oh, nobody's good. And then you go and you see what's up for, Emmy nomination. You go, well, this was another Holocaust story, and this was fantastic. So there's always room, in my opinion, for something that is good. And then you also have to look at it, does it have legs for multiple seasons, unless it's a limited series. But limited series aren't really sold on the story. I mean, yes, it has to be a good product, but it very often has to do with the packages. Is it going to have a writer-director who's going to do all of them? Like my friend Leslie Linka-Glatter just did with 0 Day, which is fabulous, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
What's the biggest crisis you faced, either on stage or in your career, and how'd you handle it? Sounds like one of those interview questions, right?
You know,
Google.
And
Hi, we're at Google. Welcome. We have a crisis situation.
I am going to credit my husband, and he said this to me multiple times in my career. I tend to trust everybody, and I'm a little naive, and there are people who have other motivations than you do, and who will stab you. And he said, watch your back. And listen, fool me once, fool me twice, then I'm the stupid person. So I remember being at a rap party and someone waving to me from across the soundstage. And my assistant director looked at me and saw who I was, and he said to me, she's not your friend. And I went, look, guys, I have like other things. I love to garden, I love to cook. At that point, I was doing needlepoint. I had, excuse my language, fucking needle-pointed this person a pillow, with her favorite little animal on it. And I went, oh, she's not? And it was a huge aha moment.
Yeah, so did you regift the pillow, or did you just stop?
I had already given it to her,
Okay,
If I could have taken it back and
part.
burned it. But no, I wouldn't have done that. Also, don't let them know that they're your enemy. Keep your enemies closer. Mm-hmm. So I come from Italian. I literally grew up in soprano territory. I knew a lot of people up the river.
What a good transition to talk about labor unions.
Yes.
So you're part of the DGA negotiating committees at different parts of your life?
I've done it 3 times.
Yeah, so what's it like to represent your fellow directors, and what is it like sitting across from studio people and try to find a deal that's good for everyone?
And I will tell you, that has changed drastically. The first time I did it, people in the room could make the decisions. The last time, nobody could make the decision, which was interesting, because everybody had to go back to the person who could make the decision, which was a very, very different climate. And knowing that, we knew things would take a little longer. And I don't think I'm giving away anything that anybody in the business doesn't know. The DGA negotiates from data. And our data is so good, and we spend a crap load of money on it, that it is trusted when we go in and say, this, and this, and then they don't just accept our data, they check it, and it's right. So when we ask for something, we're 90% sure that we're asking for something we think we can win or is important enough to fight for. The last thing, that was our sticking point was how we were going to deal with AI. So there's no job that can be done right now by AI that a director or the director's team, assistant directors, UPMs, have done in the past.
Unit production managers, aren't you explaining unit production managers?
Unit production managers.
Okay,
so that's not allowed. And if we see anything that happens, we go right to the guild, and they've got teeth. Yeah. And being part of a union, and it wasn't my first union. I was Actors Equity was my first union, then SAG, then AFTRA. Didn't get to Variety, but other than that, I'm a huge believer in those kind of negotiations. And I also feel like you have to prioritize. There's things that are left on the table at every negotiation, but you have to know what's the most important thing you're fighting for, and that has to represent the needs of the union that you're part of.
And so I think as a director, when we've talked, you said preparation, right? And it sounds like that transferred over into the negotiation style as well.
Oh, yeah. And we start a year in advance. And we hire the best people who are looking at what the industry outlook is. And yeah, it takes, and then starting out with, let's say, if we ask every group in the DGA to say, okay, what would you like to fight for this year? We may start out with 500 things and synthesize it down to, these are our top 15 things.
Is there anything, just go back to the AI for 1 second, then we'll take questions. Is there any tools you've seen yet that make your job easier by using AI?
Tiling. Do you guys know what that is? Tiling is, let's say I'm shooting, and I've done this. I've shot Major League Baseball stadiums. I've shot huge convention centers that seem to be populated with people when I've only had 100 extras. And that's where I will take 100 people. Now, have I moved people from one part of a baseball stadium when I'm shooting first base? Yes. And then they have to sit behind first base. But what I'm also doing is taking those people, changing their clothes, putting a hat on, taking a hat off, and then taking them as a group, photographing them. And AI is very, very, very good at this.
Nothing in terms where you're taking a script, you're feeding it in and say, how would you block this in the Mary Lou Belli system, and then have a storyboard.
There are systems that do that now.
Mm-hmm. No interest?
No.
Because the fun is doing it.
The fun is, you're absolutely right, Brian.
Okay.
The fun is doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to let my wife know I was right today. That's very exciting news. Questions from the audience?
Yes, right there. Hi.
This was a great session. Thank you for the trauma bonding moment the question was interesting. I've been working the last year and a half with a group of students that want to create a great new show for them by them, but they can't quite get the hook and the idea right. And I keep saying to them, it's enough. Just go have the meeting and start to work together with the industry. And so I just wanted to get back up for what I've been saying to them.
Oh, in my opinion, you're absolutely right, because there's no idea.
Thank you. That's all I needed.
There's no idea that doesn't morph. Okay, and at any meeting, someone's going to say yes and or yes but. Hopefully, they're saying yes and then listen. I have a career because I know how to pivot, and part of that comes from dancing.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, start with the buyer you're least interested in. Let them workshop it for you, and so then you get all the objections, and by the time you get to the people you really want to sell it to, you've cleaned it up and it's all ready to go.
That's brilliant.
That's why I teach here. Well?
I've seen that you've directed across tons of comedies and dramas. Can you speak a little to the latitude or lack of latitude that you give actors in comedy versus drama as a director?
I will tell you, literally in the last episode I just directed, there were actors who happened to be funny who did a little bit extra on their audition tape that made the difference between whether they got the part or someone else. And sometimes it's an improv line, but also knowing that they can't step on a joke that belongs to the star of the show. So it's knowing when to add on and when it's appropriate. So sometimes in comedy, that does make a difference. In terms of the way I direct actors in comedy and drama, it doesn't change for me. I'm always looking for the funny in the drama, and I'm always looking for the drama in the funny. So it's about having a three-dimensional character. I will tell you, when I cast, or when I'm teaching, directing, and casting, I use a rubric, that my co-author and the Directors Tell the Story book I co-wrote with Bethany Rooney. Bethany came up with this rubric, and it's very simple. Character name, comma, age, comma, profession, comma, is, person's name, age, is a profession, who is, and then we have three adjectives to describe that character. The first one is an emotional adjective, the second one is a physical adjective, and then the third one, and this is the important part, is contrasting. Because the moment you add contrast to a normal characteristic of a person, you add dimension. And if you think of your best friends. They're this and this, but they're also that. And I always just say, if you just say adjective, adjective, and or but or yet, and then you add that third one, you immediately get a character who has some gravitas. Does that help? Okay.
Anybody else? Up right there. Oh, sorry, you've got somebody. So there's lights in our eyes. We really can't see anything.
You have a hat on. I can tell that.
Great. Hi. I was wondering if you've noticed any sort of like formal changes in your directing style or in the industry in general as TV has gradually shifted from multicam to single cam. Not always, but in general.
And back to multicam.
Yeah.
And guys, there's one reason for that. Everybody knows it. Money. Multicam is so much cheaper to produce than single cam. Yes, it's being able to see trends. So I had friends who were executives in Movies of the Week, and within 2 years of every network having multiple MOWs or television made-for-TV movies, they were gone.
Yeah, they had migrated to cable.
Yeah, and that was like
less money. It was no longer a business. Really.
Yeah, and then I also saw multicam, as you said. All of a sudden, oh, but we can do it so much better. It'll be so much more elegant. And it was, and I knew the people behind that. So my friend Todd, who was doing Malcolm in the Middle, and was it better? And was it different? And did it have a lot more? Not because the stories were always funny, and the stories are always funny in sitcom. Did it look better? Hell yes. But then you have to ask, does the audience know the difference? And is the audience who's coming to a comedy want to see, oh, that's a great shot? Or as Ted Levitan said, or Steve Levitan said about Modern Family, I've never seen somebody laugh at a camera move. Mm-hmm. But did they laugh at the funny? Yes. So you just have to know what you're selling and what the currency of what you're selling is. And then also not be stupid to open your eyes to trends.
Go ahead.
Hi, over here. Hi, thank you so much.
There you are.
My name's JP. I'm one of Professor Frons' students. And
one of my best students, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Make it a really good question, JP.
He's always teaching us, the business school students, about the importance of forming relationships with creative talent in the industry. And I was wondering if you could speak to some of the relationships you've had with people on more the business side, if you will, and those that have been very successful. What is it that they're doing well in building those relationships and working with creative talent? And those that have been unsuccessful, what are the mistakes they're making?
Okay, so let's talk about a path. So if my currency was I'm an actor's director and I am requested throughout my entire career by an actor to direct their show, that's my access point. So you first analyze what your access point is. And then you can spread out who you know. So once I get on that show, then I go, but I really didn't have access to the exec producers and the current executives. But now I do, because now I'm a director who's been asked back for 2, 3, 4, in case of NCIS New Orleans, 7 years on a show. Or, you reach 100th episode of something that you're doing. It's your circle keeps growing, but it's important to know where your access point is to get into that circle and then cultivate those relationships. And listen, it's also, and it might be because, I'm getting paid to be an exec producer now. If there's something that's costing money we're not getting the bang for our buck out of that, I'm the first person to say it. And at the same time, if I need that extra camera or that, or that I need that guest star who's got oomph that's going to make everybody watch that show, then I go, we should be spending the money here. But it's also having the wisdom to know the difference.
That's a great way to end the session. Good question.
Good question.
JP. Well done. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mary Lou.
Thank you. Have a great conference.